There we go. You can see me better now. I feel taller. Will you all please join me in Dashi? Repeat the Nembutsu with me. Namo Amidabusu. Namo Amidabusu. Namo Amidabusu. Namanda, Samanda, Samanda. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Is it just me, or is it a little warm in the Hondo today? How many of you are cold? Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm certain if you stepped outside, it would be pretty cold. Yesterday, I could feel the cool weather coming, and then who here heard the thunder and light, or heard the thunder and saw the flash of lightning? Yeah. It shook the whole house for us, and we were kind of like, oh, well, you know, we thought like a truck had crashed or something, but it was just the thunder. It was just nature telling its own way that they're bringing the rain now. Today, I would like to talk to the Dharma School students about wisdom and compassion. Wisdom and compassion. You need both. And both are aspects of Amida Buddha. And with one of the best ways I'd like to sort of illustrate this topic of wisdom and compassion is through the telling of a children's story. Now, I was told this story a lot as a young Dharma School student by my own childhood minister, Reverend Bob Oshita. And he told it so many times I got sick of it. But now, as an adult, I very much appreciate it. But this is a story that talks about the unbalance of wisdom and compassion. Remember at the beginning how I said you need both wisdom and compassion. Complete wisdom without any compassion is useless, because wisdom without compassion is cold, heartless, and who would listen to you, and why should they? But otherwise, just compassion can be just as dangerous, because then you don't know how to take care of yourself. You keep giving and giving and giving your energy, your time, your money, without thinking how to be healthy for yourself. And then what ends up happening is you create an unhealthy version of yourself that never knows how to say no. It's almost like telling, your child or something, like, you always say yes when they say, I want this new phone, or I want this new PlayStation, or I want this new thing. Maybe the kids would like that, but that's also too much compassion without wisdom. But this children's story is the story of Urashimataro. Okay, Dharma School students, raise your hands. How many of you have heard this story before? Okay, one person. That's good. That means that for the most of you, this will be new. Adults, how many of you have heard this story before? I know that Reverend Yukawa has heard the story many times as well from Reverend Bob Oshita. So forgive me if this is a story that you are familiar with, but I hope for those of you who have not heard this story before, you will enjoy it. And I will keep it as short as I can. So one day, there was a kind fisherman by the name of Urashimataro. Okay, he was very known in the town for being one of the kindest people, one of the most lovable and kindest people in the whole town. He was famous for his generosity. He would always be there to help. He would always be there to, kind of like what we do for bazaar and obon and things. He'd just come and help, right? So he was definitely one of those people. One day, as Urashimataro was walking on the beach, he saw a small group of boys hitting a turtle with a stick, right? There was this big, huge sea turtle, and they were hitting it with a stick. They were being mean to the turtle. So Urashimataro goes to the boys and says, hey, you shouldn't do that, and kind of shoos them away. Don't do that. Be nice to the turtle. And the boys, kind of run away. And then, to his amazement, the turtle speaks to Urashimataro. And the turtle says, you must be the famous Urashimataro. You have saved my life. I cannot repay you enough. I thank you. And he dives back into the ocean. The next day, Urashimataro goes on the same beach, and he sees the turtle again. And the turtle comes to him and says, Urashimataro, my king and queen down in the sea kingdom have heard of your heroic act of saving me. We wish to thank you personally. We wish to host you to show our gratitude for your generosity and your heroism. And Urashimataro says, that's fine. I would be happy to accept the invitation. So then Urashimataro climbs on the back of the turtle, and because this is a children's story, this works. The turtle is magic, right? Because the turtle talks. But they both dive deep into the ocean. Surprisingly, Urashimataro finds that he can breathe underwater, and he's able to hang on to the turtle. This is a very famous image, by the way. For those of you who I think Yamamoto Yama has that nori, there used to be a picture of Urashimataro sitting on the turtle's back, or on the turtle's shell. That's a famous story. Anyways, so down into the ocean they go, and Urashimataro beholds this beautiful underwater sea kingdom. So for those of you who are watching Rings of Power, or the prequel to Lord of the Rings, think of one of those beautiful sea kingdoms like Numenor, right? Beautiful. And Urashimataro, this simple fisherman, is brought before the king and queen of this underwater sea kingdom. And they say, we have prepared a huge feast, a huge banquet, and entertainment for you. And Urashimataro is overwhelmed with all of the beautiful royalty and the food that is given to him. So a few hours pass, and Urashimataro eats his fill, and he enjoys himself. And then he says, okay, I think it's time for me to go home now. But the king and queen beseech him, and they say, no, please stay longer. Have fun with us. We still have more food for you to try. There's still so much entertainment we want to show you. There's still all these beautiful activities we want you to partake in. Please stay. And Urashimataro, not wanting to be rude and unkind, says, okay, I'll stay a little bit longer. Days pass. And every time Urashimataro, as the day ends, would say, I think it's time for me to go home now. And every time the king and queen would beseech him and say, please, no, don't leave, stay longer. And every time Urashimataro, not wanting to be rude or seem ungrateful, says, okay, I will stay longer. But finally, probably after a week or so passes, Urashimataro realizes it's time for me to go home. It's time for me to return to my family. It's time for me to return to where I belong. And no matter how much the king and queen beseeched him, they said, Urashimataro this time finally said, it's really time for me to leave and go home. And so finally realizing that they weren't going to get Urashimataro to stay, they bring Urashimataro a box. And they say to him, this is our parting gift to you. Now this is a unique gift because you cannot open this box. There sadly is also another caveat to you leaving, is once you leave, you cannot come back. You cannot come back. And Urashimataro says, I understand. And before he leaves, on the same turtle, by the way, who brought him there, the king and queen once again call out to Urashimataro and say, whatever you do not open that box. Urashimataro thought this was strange, but he said he wouldn't, and up to the surface he went with the turtle. He gets onto the beach, and he and the turtle part ways, and he looks at the town that he left behind, and he cannot recognize it. He says, he thought to himself, did the turtle bring me to the wrong place? But then he walks through the streets of the town that he left behind, and he could see the names of the streets are the same. The geography of the layout of the town is still the same, but the buildings are different. The people are wearing different clothes. different than the fashion that he left. So finally he goes to his old home, to his family home, and he sees another family living there, and he knocks on the door, and he said, "What's going on?" He goes, "Isn't this the house of Urashimataro?" And they said to him, "Urashimataro? That name," they said, "Urashimataro drowned in the ocean over 100 years ago. How could you say that you're Urashimataro?" And Urashimataro goes, this is impossible. But as he goes throughout the town, he notices he doesn't see any of his old friends. He doesn't see any of his relatives. Sadly, everything that he was recognized and remembered is all gone and changed into something new. So finally, Urashimataro is overcome with a deep sense of sadness. And he goes back to the ocean where he originally met the turtle. And he thinks to himself, I have nothing left. I have, all of my friends are gone, my family is gone. I have nothing left here for myself. The only thing that I have left is this box. So, Ashlyn, what do you think was in the box?
Probably a way back.
Oh, a way back. Interesting. That's a very good guess. That's a very good guess. Let's see. How about Tay? What do you think was in the box?
I don't know. Maybe time machine.
A time machine. Okay. Well, these are both very good guesses. These are both very good guesses. Thank you very much for your guesses. So finally, Urashimataro decides to himself, I know I promised the king and queen that I would not open this box. But since I don't have anything left here on land, I might as well open the box and see what's inside. So Urashimataro undoes the furoshiki. Dharma school students, do you know what a furoshiki is? It's that cloth, that Japanese cloth you put around the box. So he unwraps the beautiful furoshiki, and there's a black lacquer box. Kind of similar to the one you see on the O19 here, the Gobunsho box. I'll bring it down sometime. And Urashimataro opens the box. And up comes this cloud of gray smoke. Whoosh, whoosh, comes over. And Gus, once the smoke clears, who do you think was there?
Turtle.
The turtle. No, that's a good guess. That's a good try. But actually, no. The story is a little bit sadder, I'm afraid. Once the smoke clears, there stands Urashimataro as a very, very, very old man. And this was great because Ashlyn and Tay kind of said, a way back or a time machine. In a sense, they are correct. Inside the box was his time, his youth, stored up. So he realizes that under the sea, time passes much slower than on land. Time goes a lot slower. So what was probably a week down in the underwater kingdom was a huge amount of time on land. And this is the end of the story. Now, of course, for a lot of children's stories, we expect the happily ever after ending. We want we want there to be sort of a thing where he can go back in time and go back to the time he was in before he went down to the kingdom. But actually, this story of Urashimataro has a very important lesson for all of us, including Dharma school students and adults alike. And that is the balance of wisdom and compassion. For Urashimataro, yes, no one could ever question Urashimataro's kindness. Kindness is so important, and we must all be kind. But we must also have wisdom as well. You cannot have one without the other. See, with Urashimataro, he was just kind. He was only compassionate. But there was very little wisdom on his part. Always wanting to be polite, always wanting to take care of others first before taking care of himself. This is a very important story, and while it may seem sad, and we ask ourselves, why did such a terrible thing happen to this poor man who was nothing but kind? Kindness is essential, but it is not the only element that we Dharma school students and everyone else must understand. We must also have wisdom to help guide us and make difficult decisions at times. Sometimes We will have to make unpopular decisions, decisions that not everybody likes, but in a sense, sometimes have to be done. Dharma school students, you must also make these decisions to take care of yourselves as well. And this is similar, I think, to the story, or not to the story, but to sort of when you're on an airplane, right? I know most people in here have been on an airplane. When they tell you, when the oxygen masks drop, to put the oxygen mask over yourself before you put it on somebody else. If you just put the oxygen mask on somebody else first, yes, you may be able to put the oxygen mask on, but first you need to be able to be sure that you take care of yourself and help yourselves before you give yourself and help others as well. And this isn't to say that you shouldn't be kind or that you shouldn't do wonderful things. But this is to say that, just doing kindness or just doing things for others as they are in acts of kindness is also kindness and compassion without wisdom. And these are both aspects of Amida Buddha. So I would like to thank you, Dharma school students, and everyone else for listening to today's Dharma Talk. I think next weekend, when I give the Dharma Talk for the Dharma school students, I'll try to tell the story of a person and find a story of a person who has only the wisdom side with no compassion, to show you how that's not good either. There's a balance. So thank you all very much for your time and listening to this story today. In closing, will you please join me in that show? Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. All foolish beings, whether good or evil, when they hear and entrust to Amida's universal vow, are praised by the Buddha as people of vast and excellent understanding. Such a person is called a pure white lotus. For evil sentient beings of wrong views and arrogance, the Nembutsu that embodies Amida's primal vow is hard to accept in Shinji. This most difficult of difficulties, nothing surpasses. Namo Amida. Namo Amida. Namo Amida. Well, hello again, everyone. Thank you all very much for indulging me and sticking through the chanting of the Shoshin Nembutsu. I know that this chant today was a little bit on the longer side, but I really wanted to pay respects today to Shinran Shonin. We were unable to, just due to time constraints last weekend, to participate or to have the chanting of the Shoshin Nembutsu. Many of you remember that last weekend, right, on Sunday, was October 16th. And it's very rare, I think, that we are able to celebrate the 16th on a Sunday. But if we are able to, we should definitely try our best to use that time or to have that time in honor of Master Shinran. The Gosandai that I read from this morning, it comes from the chant that we chanted today called the Shoshin Nembutsu. This chant is located in Shinran Shonin's major work called the Kyogyo Shinsho, or the Teaching, Practice, Shinjin, and Enlightenment of the Pure Land Way. This is his major works. And this chant is located at the very end of the second chapter on practice. But for all of us, just so you know, for those of us in here today who are priests of the Jodo Shinshu sect, we are required to memorize this entire chant. We have to memorize it from that, which means we don't look at it in a book. We have to be able to recite it in two versions, actually, two ways of doing it. And so, for many folks who are actually going into the ordination or going through Tokudo, they are now just starting to realize what goes into memorizing this particular gatha or hymn or gatha that Shinran wrote. But one of the things that we're taught, right, and this is very interesting because some of you may have various opinions, of course, on memorizing things, but just out of curiosity, how many of you can recite the Pledge of Allegiance from memory, right, from when you were a kid, right? You stand, the teacher, right, in class makes you stand up and, you put your hand on your heart, right, right? And then you recite the Pledge of Allegiance just from memory, right? Eventually it gets to the point where you don't need to read it anymore. And so again, right, whatever your opinion on the Pledge of Allegiance is, right, at some point, it was considered to be very, very important that our students, like growing up, memorize this. And this is the same with the Shoshin Nembutsu. Maybe this isn't the best example in order, to compare it to, but the essential teachings of our sect of Jodo Shinshu are in this chant. And it's not, and when for us as Jodo Shinshu priests, we shouldn't think of it as Reverend Kodo Umezu, who was the former bishop of the BCA, told this to me. We shouldn't think of this as, especially as priests, as a chant to memorize in order to become priests, right? This isn't something that like we have a test on necessarily, or well, we kind of do, but this isn't something that, okay, in order to become a Jodo Shinshu priest, I need to memorize this. I need to memorize this chant. If anything, it's this chant and this teaching for us should be recited every day, that to the point where it becomes memorized, and that way the Honganji and the head temple can see how dedicated we are to help share this teaching with everybody else. And what goes into this teaching is also really, really important. So for many of us who remember the story of Shinran, he practiced very diligently on Mount Hiei for 20 years. 20 years doing hard practices. Some of you may know what this is, but there's something called the Senichi Kai Hogyo, or the 1,000-day marathon, where you have to, for those of you who have been to Mount Hiei, you know how big it is. You have to circumambulate that mountain for 1,000 days. And you have to start early in the morning, like 4 o'clock in the morning, and you don't get back until around 8. Then, in the middle of that time, you have to do something even more dangerous called the do-iri, which means you have to starve yourself. No food or anything for 7 days. You have to starve yourself. For many of these monks who do this, they come close to death. And when they're finished with the do-iri, they actually have to be carried back to their temple on Mount Hiei in order to nurse themselves back, to get back to health and everything. So you look at these monks when they're finished with the do-iri, and they're like, you see how kind of big I am, right? Imagine how skinny I would be after the do-iri. These are the kinds of hard practices that Master Shinran had to do on Mount Hiei. However, he realized that when he was up there and practicing hard and diligently for 20 years, he was no closer to achieving enlightenment than the time that he started. He did all of these hard practices and realized that he was no closer to enlightenment. And one of the core reasons for this was because he looked deep within himself and he could see that he is still a foolish being. He is still an ordinary being, as we all are. Doesn't matter how many of the practices and things that he did on Mount Hiei, he was still an ordinary being, just like the rest of us. So how can he, through his own power, reach enlightenment? And this is where he found his teacher in Master Honen Shonin, who said that we as ordinary beings are already embraced, already saved by Amida Buddha's wisdom and compassion. And especially for us as ordinary beings, who cannot do all of those hard practices, those hard, austere practices. And again, I ask all of us who are here today, who would like to do the Senichi Kai Hogyo and the do-iri? Probably none of you would raise your hands. People jokingly say that I would. I love Mount Hiei, by the way. But I myself am also karmically incapable of achieving enlightenment on my own. And this is one of the core teachings that we are taught in the Shoshin Nembutsu, the chant that we did today, is all foolish beings, whether good or evil, when they hear and entrust to Amida's universal vow, are praised by the Buddha as people of vast and excellent understanding. Such a person is called a pure white lotus. Once we realize how limited we are as human beings, how sometimes consumed by our own ego that we are when we entrust ourselves to the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, the teaching of Bodhisattva Dharmakara, becoming Amida Buddha, and embracing all sentient beings of vastness, wisdom, and compassion. Then we too join the ranks of those of the truly settled, those who have no fear of death and the unknown. This person is called a pure white lotus. And this isn't to say that, okay, all of us, we take refuge in the teaching and then we're all good to go. In some sense, yes, that is the teaching. But I think what Shinran was having us do was constantly having ourselves self-reflect and look at ourselves. How much do we entrust in the teaching? Do we entrust in the teaching? How seriously do we take this teaching? These are things that we have to ask ourselves every day. And then in doing so, we can definitely live a more authentic life that Shinran Shonin had originally intended for us. Not to do hard, austere practices that can definitely test one's body and physical strength, but in order to really look deep within ourselves and see that we are only limited beings who must rely on the wisdom and compassion of Amida Buddha, because Amida's wisdom and compassion already embraces us. And this is a hard thing to accept. This is a hard thing. We are still human. We are still filled with our own egos. We still have much trust in our own abilities and our own time, in our time on this earth. So it is hard to accept that we are limited. But regardless, the truth is that we are. And we also must accept that the wisdom and compassion will still continue to embrace all of us, whether good or evil or foolish or wise. So with this in mind, I sincerely hope that we reflect on the wise words of Master Shinran and pay homage to a wonderful, beautiful teaching. Please join me in that. All foolish beings, whether good or evil, when they hear and entrust to Amida's universal vow, are praised by the Buddha as people of vast and excellent understanding. Such a person is called a pure white lotus. For evil sentient beings of wrong views and arrogance, the Nembutsu that embodies Amida's primal vow is hard to accept in Shinji. This most difficult of difficulties, nothing surpasses. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda Samanda Sama.